Because I grew up here, I feel like I'll always see Belfast as like home. Even if I move away someday, I'll always still see Belfast as home. I'll come back. And that's the other thing, like, we grew up here. Like, this is our home. Like, we don't really want to be treated like we're outsiders whenever this is our home. My name is Penny Mock and I'm an accountant and I do part-time modelling.
You mentioned before that you were born in Malaysia and then you moved over when you were young. So do you have any memories of when you were in Malaysia?
Oddly I do. I have loads. Every time I visit Malaysia, I know like, this is where I've been whenever I was younger, like this is where I was born.
Yeah, and do you feel like you have like a strong connection to that place even though you've grown up in Northern Ireland?
Where I used to live, yes, because like it'll always be like home in my head, at the back of my head. Culturally, no. Just because I've grown up here, like I've learned my friends' culture. I've celebrated the celebrations here, like Christmas and all, whereas they would have their Chinese New Year different and like different dates and stuff. So yeah, every time I'm in Malaysia, I do feel a little different.
That is quite hard because I've heard a lot of people that haven't been born here but have grown up here from a different culture. It's like, we had a guy yesterday who was from Pakistan background, and he was talking about how like the culture that you go back to has moved on and evolved from when you were younger. So it's like you kind of don't feel that belonging to that place anymore, even though you know you're from there, but it's like it's a different place. Is that how you experience it?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like even every year I go back, the place changes and you're like, oh yeah, last time I was here, what I've grown to like isn't really the same anymore. Like I wasn't growing with it. So yeah, I don't feel like I'm from there, but I'm not from here either. It's kind of like an in-between place.
Was there many other people that were not from Northern Ireland growing up around you?
No, I think I was the only Asian in my primary school. It wasn't until I was in Methody, which is like years onwards, before there were other races in the same school.
And like, were you aware that you were the only Asian, or like, did it feel any different?
Initially it did, but then maybe like in some way I was so used to it that I wasn't like constantly conscious and aware about it.
So how did you fall into modelling?
A photographer reached out to me and asked me if I would model for a hairdresser, and I was like, ooh, this is fun. It was so crazy though. I got my hair multicolored and everything. It was so much fun. And it sort of just went off from there. And then from then I was getting work weekly after the photo came out.
And it's interesting because it seems like it's a cool way for you to express yourself creatively. Like law and accounting is very rigid and structured, but you seem to have this
creative side and go off and do what I do. What I actually love about modelling is most of the time you can just message a photographer and be like, I want to do this, are you up for doing this? And like you get to like express your creative side that way as well, so it's like, it's a lot of fun.
And then I think we talked about it as well, like you're a dancer.
I did do it very competitively. I was doing it up till I was 15, 16. I got very serious towards the end, which is why I left eventually. It was the pressure, it's just not fun at all. I think you work towards like 7 days a week as well. Like I was training every single day. So it was a very big difference to stop completely. You just feel like, oh, there's so much free time, what do I do? It becomes part of you and like suddenly you're like, I'm not a dancer anymore, like what am I? I don't think I dealt with it very well. I was still like trying to do like little things but not take it so seriously. Like I joined pole dancing and joined cheerleading. Like it's just my way of like still sticking at it but not too seriously, like still have some form of life, social life. See, when you're in a dance competition, sometimes you're dancing by yourself in front of like hundreds of people. Like you can't afford to like think about what other people think. And maybe that's just transferred to like me at my own time with my own friends. I'm like dancing without a care, like me doing me, you know? It's not in the back of my head, what does other people think?
It inspires me as well because I think for me, I have definitely grown up thinking too much about what other people think.
Yeah.
And that's definitely held me back. But it's just like really powerful to see that you haven't let things like bog you down, and you have a really strong work ethic and just focused on like what you want to do.
I do that with dancing, but I don't feel like I do that socially. Like sometimes socially I'd still be like, I wonder what they think of this and that, like, you know. I think it's something a lot deeper. I think it's because whenever I was younger, because I didn't speak English fluently, whenever I was younger, I was like, do they understand me? Like, are they judging me because I'm not fluent in their language? You know, sometimes when you speak to someone and they're like, you miss what they say, but not because you don't understand their language. Like at this stage, I can speak it fluently, but sometimes you miss a few words, and like you're in the back of your head, you're like, wonder if they think that like my English is terrible. I don't want them to be thinking that like I can't communicate with them, you know, or that like I'm not good enough.
And do you feel like that holds you back at all in social situations?
Sometimes in group conversations I'd stay quiet just because I don't want to be like that person who says something that's like, that doesn't make sense.
That's really interesting that, so when you moved here you didn't speak English, and then you learnt it and then became fluent. Like that is so cool.
But like my parents' English aren't great either. I sort of learnt it like through school, which is strange considering like, how did I know? You know, how did I know what things were and like where words went?
Do you remember the process of learning English and trying to communicate with your teachers as a child?
No. I think it's just playing with them and like learning like word by word and like understanding, like just trying to be like perceptive of like what everyone else is doing and like associating words with their action. I think that's how I learned it, but yeah, I remember it being really difficult for my sister. My sister didn't learn how to speak English up till she was maybe 7 years old, yeah. And she was struggling so much throughout school as well, and every now and then she still was telling me like it's still very confusing. It's because like she learned later on, it's so hard to be like, this is Chinese and this is English, and like sometimes we have like different ways of putting words, and it does get really confusing when you're trying to learn both of them at the same time.
That's amazing. Like I find that so interesting, like that navigation of like learning a language, being in a new place, trying to make friends, and it's like there's a skill there in that. Like you should definitely take credit for that, you know, of you just had to make it work.
I feel like I do wing it a lot of time. I don't know, it's a skill of winging it.
Where do you see your future here in Northern Ireland? Like what's your dreams and aspirations?
So, because I grew up here, I feel like I'll always see Belfast as like home. Even if I move away someday, I'll always still see Belfast as home. I'll come back and have kids here. If I do have kids, I'd have it here. And that's the other thing, like, we grew up here. Like, this is our home. Like, we don't really want to be treated like we're outsiders whenever this is our home.
And do you ever feel like you are treated like an outsider?
Whenever I was younger, yeah. But not so much now. But I know most others still do feel like an outsider. I actually spoke to quite a few people yesterday along with my sister, and it is quite sad. It's actually very deeply disappointing that like they get it on a monthly or weekly basis. They get called names or like verbal abuse, and like they live in almost like a fearful way of living, and it's not. It makes me think that they don't walk about streets freely, and that's not right. And which is why I'm like so happy that I'm doing this today, and like hope it does make a difference. I just don't think it's fair considering like this is where they grew up. Like anyone should be able to call anywhere their home if they grew up in it, regardless of your race. I hope this video and like all your other videos does make an effect and like make a change, because everything that I've heard in the last day, it's not right and it needs to change.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think like people don't really realize like what we all kind of go through, you know, when we identify as like this is our home, but then they're questioning where are you really from, and then what does that mean?
There's always gonna be a sense that we're different, because I feel like a lot of people still don't know different people of different races. It's only natural that you're like gravitated towards someone that is similar to you. When you don't know another person of colour, it's so easy to dislike them. I just want to include like ways that like people could discourage racism, educating young people, because they are the future. If we can educate them young now to think more positively or equally about people of colour, even if like other people want to see us as different, fine, like you're special being different. It makes you unique, and I do find that, like, I think that's where my confidence comes from. I feel different, well, but initially in others, whenever I was younger, even though I was getting racist comment, I also was like, I'm also like the first thing people look at whenever they walk in a classroom, you know, like I'm special that way. Yeah, and they should feel special, especially if you have like two cultures to grow up to as well. Like, it is rich and it can be beautiful.